I'll now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for May 27th, 2015. Julie, will you please call the roll?
Chair Shannon,
Here.
Vice Chair Stetcher,
Here.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
Susan Claus,
Here.
Councillor Cook is absent, Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris, are you on the phone? Okay.
Jennifer?
She may have stepped away for a moment.
Okay. Councillor Henderson is absent. Andy Jensen is not here. Councillor King is absent. Councillor Kuiper.
Here.
Andy McConnell.
Here.
Mirta Meyer.
Here.
Council President Robinson.
Here.
And Kurt Studer.
Here.
Did you get
She's on. Counselor Harris, are you there?
Okay.
She might have got knocked off. I heard her on there earlier.
Gotta call her back. Yeah, I'm calling.
All right. Well, we will attempt to regain communications, but either way, I believe that we do have a quorum at this point.
Yes.
Okay. We'll hold on just a moment.
I am going to ask, because the person who's going to do the minutes is not here, and she's going to have to do them from the video. I need you to really be good about talking into your mic so that she gets clear audio on
Is that
it.
you, Susan?
Hi, Brad. I got knocked off.
Okay.
Okay, while we're working on getting the telephone communications put together, a couple of
there,
business items to address.
I'm here.
We are not going to be taking
Yes, I am.
public testimony tonight for the main budget. We will be later on taking public testimony for the URA budget. I think we've had adequate opportunity in the last couple of meetings, and we need to get some business done. Also, just as a reminder to all of the committee members that in many cases, we're kind of taking a big picture item. We're not here to try and work on line item by line item budgets. If you have specific issues, details, questions, we'll be going around the table and asking everybody to chime in what they think. And if you have a change that you'd like to propose for the budget, I certainly would invite you to make a motion at that time, and the committee can discuss and resolve that issue at that time. Anything else I need to say? Okay. Well, what I'd like to do then,
Sorry.
we'll still wait for the phone. So make sure we got everybody on board.
Hi, thanks for calling. Sorry I missed you. Please leave your name and number.
She says she's on, so I don't know if she's muted.
Okay. Well, anyway, we will proceed, and Brad will continue to try and communicate if necessary. I guess I'll throw in a couple of comments of myself, and then I'm going to go over to Andrew and have Andrew start us off. All in all, I appreciate the effort that all of the city staff put together on this budget. I understand where we've got some increases in manpower. And, you know, particularly in the police department, we're increasing it by one full-time individual. We're bringing in an administrative staff, particularly for parks and that effort. And we understand what's going on with the Performing Arts Center. I don't have any particular changes that I'm recommending as a citizen part of this budget committee. I do have some concerns that, you know, the economy is getting better right now. We're increasing manpower. We're getting increased SDCs. But I want to make sure that all of this goes with a cautionary note, that we're not jumping forward and saying everything's rosy, because we need to be careful on that. And then I particularly am concerned that we've got some issues coming up with PERS in the next future, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on. So, well done, staff. I think you've done an excellent job. It just means that we've got more work to do next year. So, anyway, those are my comments. Andrew, do you want to get us started? If you have any other comments to add or changes or suggestions that you'd like to make to the budget?
No changes or suggestions, thanks. I think that the city staff has done a good job in demonstrating their due diligence to keeping a good balance between the requirements of law and the needs of the city, and at the same time accomplishing plans for future growth and meeting what the city council has given them as a target for that 20% for reserves year over year. I like very much that the plan going forward for the next at least 3 years is taken into account with keeping reserves as they are at target, and also providing for operating the infrastructure that in the last few years the city spent money on. And in order to do that, you gotta spend a little money to keep it going. And I think that that balance is reflected in this budget, and I would be ready to entertain a motion.
I would agree with Andrew on the points that he's made with respect to staff's care in preparing this budget. I think it's important to note, and it's important to remind the committee of the charge that we were given at the time that we volunteered our time to be on the committee. And as I was reviewing this budget, I remember the specific charge that we've been tasked with is to review the 2015-16 goals and ascertain whether or not we are comfortable with the proposed goals that staff has presented to us. And in the event that we're not comfortable with those goals, those are the issues that we should be focusing our attention on. I think in advance of being a part of the committee, and as a member of the community, it can often appear that being a member of a committee like this is an act in futility, if you will. But it's not. And the reason I don't think that it is because our staff is very well prepared, and I would like to believe that the measures taken by staff that are then reviewed by our city manager are reviewed diligently, thoughtfully, and carefully. And like Andrew, while some pieces of the budget may not meet my personal desires as a member of the community, I do understand and believe that the voice of the community has been heard, and that is what's been presented to us. So I thank you, staff.
Why don't we just keep going around the table?
I had some comments last time that address my concerns, or some of them at least, and I'd like to just finish with some additional thoughts that I've had since our last meeting, but also reserve the right to come back and address a couple more things before a motion's made, especially in light of the fact that some information was made available today on some in the past week about the police staffing in a comparative city to us, and so I'm just going to say, first of all, I agree with Chair Shannon that there needs to be a understanding of caution. I think that our budget, while it is balanced, does not reflect too many of perhaps our department heads' wants versus their needs. And I would have liked to have seen more things that were on the list of things that we didn't necessarily include in the budget because we're being a little more frugal. I know that there's going to be a cost of living increase for all staff of the city. I don't get a cost of increase every year. My salary hasn't gone up in the last 4 years. So I think that the citizens of Sherwood are not necessarily reflective of the fact that our economy is growing in a positive manner. I think that things are still tight for a lot of people. And I think that this budget, I struggle with it quite a bit. I've raised some issues, and I understand that I'm in the minority on perhaps coming up with some alternatives or things that we might be able to cut. For the police officers, we are seeking an additional police officer, and although I have mixed feelings about it, I do, and I am going to recommend that we include the new full-time position for a police officer. I would like to express my own concern, both as a council person and as a committee member, that I want that extra person to reduce overtime. I do not expect or anticipate the need for as much overtime as budgeted for the police. I also expect and want to see that officer in our middle schools and elementary schools. And what came to me today, especially in looking at the adjoining cities that we are nearby of the same size, is that our officer, we only have one student resource officer, and our dog is not being used in the manner in which it was believed to have been acquired. So my thoughts are that I want that dog used. I want a student resource officer assigned to the middle schools and the elementary schools. I think rather than conducting surveys of adults in our community for a police force to find out how we're doing, that we need to focus our efforts in the school level. The school level is where you can breach those relationships with those kids. I would venture to guess that the crime level that we do see in Sherwood is probably, of the residents who live here, within the age range of either 21 or 25 and below. And going out and improving your relationships with the adults in the city is not going to do a whole lot. But reaching out to our student youth and building relationships with them, I think, is where it will make a difference. And I think Wilsonville has 3 student resource officers. And so I just think we're way understaffed on that particular thing. It's something that really jumped out at me when I saw that. I prefer to have a half-time arts center person just because we are in the first year of the arts center. But I'm willing to go with supporting the full-time person that Kristen needs because I do think there is an actual need there. I hope that's enough for her, and I'd rather like to see some other shifts in staffing levels in other locations. I don't think our planning department is in need of the amount of staff that they have, is my own personal opinion. I don't see a whole lot of development occurring. The medical marijuana is now done. Recreational marijuana is going to be addressed by planning, but it's going to be quite a ways down the road, I think. I don't think we're going to get anything that's planning's going to have to deal with in the near future. And so I think that there is some room for some reductions or adjustments in planning. I wrote down keep CR. I don't remember what that was for. I do not approve of giving the Robinhood Festival $10,000. And I acknowledge that we are so close in time to that festival that it would be a great hardship for them not to give that to them. But I will be adamant about telling the representatives myself, if I need to, that that is not something that the city should be supporting. They need to be more self-sufficient, and I will hopefully be discussing the matter with council members on that topic in the future. So those are some of my other comments in addition to what I've made. I reserve the right to come back.
Remind me that in case I do forget. So,
Okay.
But at this point, I take it you do not have any specific proposals that you'd like to make?
Oh, one thing I would like to reject is the additional staff member for our finance department. That is moving our current part-time person to a full-time position. And with the new billing or finance software that we have paid for and is coming and has yet to be implemented, I believe, I thought that might be a prime area where, of course, if we all had our druthers, we'd all want more. I think that is an area where that is probably more of a want than a need, in my opinion. So I would be entertaining a motion to reduce the budget by apparently $24,000.
I'm going to help you out with your motion. Okay. You need to motion how much and what area. So you need to say from the administration
Okay.
division budget in the general fund.
And can I make that motion after I hear the remainder comments?
If you don't want to do it now,
I'd rather wait.
Okay, we will wait then. Jennifer?
Yes, did you want to mention, back to Andy Jensen first, or can I go ahead and?
Well, actually, if you'd like, at least we'll make an announcement that Andy did come in during the conversation, so he's been added to the roll. I thought I'd take a little pity on Andy and let him catch his breath, so we'll kind of come back to him, unless you're ready right now, Andy.
I like pity.
All right. So, Jennifer?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would really like to thank the department heads for putting together a very well thought out, thoughtful budget. I also want to remind the budget committee that in my experience, which isn't very much, this is my first time as on council, but you know what we've been told by our finance director, Julie, who's been ever so helpful, thank you, that when you put together a budget and you're a department head, there are things that you want and there are things that you need. You have to go through a vetting process personally with your staff at your department level. When you put that budget together, you then move that budget forward to the finance director. The finance director vets that information, at least that's how I understand it, and vets what is needed, what is a want, what can be done in this year's budget, what can't be done. That budget then gets moved to a third level, and that's the city manager. The city manager takes a look at that, Joe took a look at that, and determined what was defensible, what was not. Now we're at the budget committee level. We're at the fourth tier of an evaluation of budget. Yes, there are top line items that we're looking at, and there's detail that some of us needed. I very much appreciated the additional detail. But I want to extend some acknowledgement that the people that are working for our city should be valued for the information that they have internally. I cannot know everything that is at the budget level, and I don't, quite frankly, don't anticipate knowing. I don't want to know. What I would rather know is that the people, the department leads that are working on the budget, know what they're doing, and they are going to work together, find out what is a need and what is a want. So that being said, I'm very happy that we still have 23% in the reserve. I think that's great. I think the fact that we are starting to come out of some of the recession that we were in and move on to a more even track cautiously is a good thing. And I'd like to reiterate also what Chairman said, and that is to be cautious as we move forward with our budget. I wanted to address a couple of things about the police department in particular. I had to think a lot about this. And one of the things I was thinking about was if you have a mom and she is doing everything for her family and allows her family to steer their ship straight, they're happy with their ship being steered straight. They don't have a problem with it, but the mom is breaking down, right? Somehow the family's going to come apart because there's enough is enough. The fabric wears thin. I don't want to see that happen. I don't want our city to start being in a more of a reactionary mode. I like the fact that we are proactive and we think about the budget. But as a side, I went ahead and looked at some information that was sent to us earlier this week. And I did some quick calculations about, there was basically 7 cities that were compared by the Wilsonville Police Department. And I ranked them based on the sworn staff compared to population and what they serve, and then the patrol staff based on population and what they serve. And I came up with a ranking, and I'm happy to share this with the Budget Committee. I do have this. We have a ranking by lowest officer to population ratio. The number 1 city that has the lowest officer to population ratio, based on my calculations, is Canby, Oregon. The city with the highest officer to population ratio, based on the numbers I was looking at, is Wilsonville. On a scale of 1 to 7, Sherwood ranked number 5 with the lowest officer population ratio. So there were basically 4 cities. We were 5th. So basically out of the 7, number 7 being with the highest population, highest ratio of police officers to population, we ranked number 5. So we're on the high end of that. Looking at our projections for the city for 2015, 2016, we're moving from the calculated population of 18,955 to a calculated of 19,300. We would have 1 patrol officer for 1,484 residents, as opposed to the city with the rank of 1 police officer for 1,300 members of the community in Canby. So we are ranked on the high end of that, and I use this to just sort of help me put in perspective what the request is from the police department and how we move forward on that. I am happy that the department leads have taken the time to evaluate this, and I'm happy that we have that 20% contingency fee, and I'm not recommending any change right now to the budget. So thank you.
Mayor Clark.
Before Mayor goes, can I just make one comment to that?
Go ahead.
I want to point out to everybody, when we do compare ourselves to other cities around us, Sherwood is one of the smallest cities in size. So Wilsonville, is almost twice the size physically of Sherwood. So I got confirmation from our manager today that Sherwood is a 4.5 square mile radius, and Wilsonville is 7.5 miles. So it's almost twice as much. So that's my only comment to that. You have to compare apples to apples sometimes, and sometimes that is not necessarily reflected in the number per capita. So
Thank you, Sally. So I am the one who asked for the information on the comparison because I have a very good relationship with the mayor of Wilsonville, and we talk all the time about our different cities, and because we have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, just like every city. Every city is unique, but I always feel like we can learn from other cities and what they're doing. You can't say Sherwood is Wilsonville, Wilsonville has I-5 run through the middle of it. That makes it very different than Sherwood. But I like to take a look at what other cities are doing because it gives us a great sort of litmus test of, where are we at in relation to our neighbors? We don't want to be our neighbors, or we would live where our neighbors live. We live here, so we want to live in Sherwood for a reason. And so it's not an attack piece. It's just an information piece. And so I wanted to give that information to everyone on the budget committee so that we could look at the numbers and say, what do we think? What do we think about this? And it was just sort of an additional piece. And I thought that it was great to be able to look at all the different cities that are similarly sized. And the reason that I did that is because when Chief was here, I heard from him some things that kind of made me think, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right to me. What I heard him say, and I think it was Council President Robinson said, is that we budgeted every year for 4 years, because I asked how many years, and so I'm guessing forever, but I asked for 4 years, $89,000 in overtime. And every year we've spent $89,000. So what that tells me is that's just sort of an additional funding for the police department. And if you look at it as that, that's fine. But that's kind of not what I look at as overtime. I think of overtime as that's the extra. And we're not here to talk about how departments do their job. We're here to talk about the budget. And so I think that the police department is fantastic. I think that Public Works is fantastic. I think that all of our departments are fantastic. We're here to look at the numbers and be prudent with the tax dollars that the citizens have given us. And so I think that in that prudence, one of the things that is going to happen is that we're going to be having a police staffing study. Why are we having a police staffing study? Because we are different than the other cities. And so that gives us a fair, realistic look at, are we staffed properly? Not are we staffed in relation to Tigard? Are we staffed in relation to Wilsonville? Are we staffed in relation to Canby? But are we, Sherwood, staffed properly? And we have support on council for that. I think that it's a fantastic idea. We're going to be doing that. We took it before the Police Advisory Board. Absolutely, we want to do that. So it seems to me, as a budget committee, that it would be preemptive to add a police officer when we haven't done the police study, and we are going to do it. We're not talking about it. We're not thinking about it. We're not in the first stages of it. We're going to do it. So it seems to me, why would we add staff in a department when we haven't done the staffing study to tell us that we need to add staff? So the overtime does not say that we need additional staff, because it's the same across the board. What tells us we need additional staff would be a study that says, you're not staffed properly in this way, and this is what you need to do. Because the worst thing, in my opinion, you could do to any organization, any business, any department, is to hire someone, have a staffing study right on the heels of hiring someone, and then you find out, oh, we're overstaffed. Oh, by the way, you're fired. That just doesn't seem like a good way of doing business to me. It seems to me we should have all of the information in front of us, which we're going to do, and we're going to do right now, before we add to the budget. So it is my recommendation, and I will be making the motion. I might as well just do it. I move, because I would like a clarification that it is $93,000 is the correct number. Okay. I move that we remove $93,000 from the general fund under the Police Services Division to the contingency fund as we wait and anticipate the conclusion of the police staffing study. That is my motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Susan. So at this point, it's open for discussion. I guess, well, Jennifer, go ahead and jump in.
Okay, so just real briefly, I thought about that as well. And being that our city is on an upward curve for growth, I thought about the worst that could happen if we have a study that was completed saying that we hold pat. It's not going to be that much longer before we need another person on staff. So if the police department is asking for another staff member right now, we have equipment that is going unused at the police department. I don't know if anybody knows that. This is for looking at child pornography. This equipment is not being used because there's no staff to do it. And this is a big issue for me. I want to see that started now. I want someone on that equipment looking for what's going on in our community now. This is something that is skipped over by the FBI. It's skipped over by Washington County because it doesn't meet that threshold level. The worst case scenario is if you hire someone now, you may find that in 6 months, even if the staffing study comes back and says we don't need anyone, I highly doubt that. I imagine the staffing study will come back and say we need a few officers, but that's just my opinion. Hire someone now, because the worst that could happen is that we're going to need them down the road anyway. I see no downside where we're going to have to go back and tell someone that they're laid off or fired. I just don't see that. We are on a community that is on an upward trend for population growth. We've already seen it between 2012 and the projected growth by 3,000 in 2015, 2016. So that's my thoughts.
So I have a question for you.
Yep.
So do you support the staffing study?
I absolutely support the staffing study, yes.
So what's the point of the staffing study if you say that the numbers have already convinced you that we
Right.
need an increase in staff?
Matrix Consulting Group had done a study with the city of Portland, and staffing study is so much more than a staffing study. Are the people where they're supposed to be? Are they placed where they're supposed to be? There's just some much more broader scope than just, are you staffed appropriately? So I'm anticipating that a staffing study will confirm what I believe is happening or what we need, and we'll be just that much further ahead when we get the study done. Do I support the staffing study? I absolutely do. Do I support having another police officer because that is what the police department says they need? Yes, I do.
Okay. Andrew, I see you lining up, so.
Yeah, I have a small follow-up on that. It seems to me that the presentation that we got from the chief was based on in the trenches or real-world information. It's like, we need another staff now, and we are confident that the staffing study will confirm that and provide other data later. So I'm with the counselor on that one. On the other side, just from procedural, if we as the budget committee recommend and the council approve the budget now to include that staff for the police, when the study is completed, like you said, 6 months from now, the money will already be in the budget to handle at least one of those. So if we move to take it out now, then that means we're automatically going to be, looking at adding it back in with a motion later. If the staffing study comes back with that recommendation. If the staffing study comes back and says, no, you don't need that person, well, certainly City Council can make an amendment to the budget at that point, or I'm not sure what the procedural term for it is, but it has to take council action to amend the budget at that time. And that would be when, firing a person would be appropriate based on lack of funds. But if the funds are there and the chief can use those funds and provide additional resources and additional capability to the city, even without a staffing study, I think it's prudent for this body to recommend that we keep that funding in there.
Okay, I've just got something, because I think, I just want to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
The money would still be there. It would just be in the contingency fund, and you just said the same thing. Either way, it would simply take a vote of council.
Mm-hmm.
So if the staffing study came back, it doesn't go anywhere. That's sort of the whole point, is it's not utilized in any way. It doesn't go into the general fund, it goes into the contingency fund.
Right.
So it is sitting there. And so you just have a motion at council that takes that money out and adds 1, 2, 3, however many police officers that the report said we needed, then that's what we do. So it's no more, in fact, it's less than if we actually used the money, hired someone, and fired someone, and then that would take even more red tape. So it doesn't take more red tape to take the money out and put it in contingency. It takes less.
Okay. Sally, before you proceed, I thought let's poll the people on the telephone, see if anybody on the phone would like to jump in and comment.
This is Counselor Harris. Can you hear me?
Please, yes, we can.
Okay. I'm torn on this because I do think hiring a staff member before the staffing study is kind of like putting the cart before the horse. However, I'm a new counselor. I've been on council for 5 months, and on some level, I have to divert to the people who are doing the job and trust them. And over the next 4 years, of course, I'll get a better sense of what's going on in each department and who's doing what and who isn't doing what, for that matter. But at this point, I have to trust the people that the prior councils and our staff have put into place to give us their best judgment of what they need, and not assume that they're all trying to get something from our citizens. With that being said, I also had to come to terms with the idea that taking things out of our budget is not going to change our property taxes, which I've been saying over and over and over again, that our general population believes that if we lower our budget, that somehow our taxes that we pay on our property taxes is going to go down. Now, for us in the room, we know that is not the case, and that's an education piece that we have to give them. I have a lot of citizens in my ear saying, we don't need more police, we don't need more staffing, we don't need 5 planners, we don't need 3 finance managers. And they're saying that because they don't like their tax bill. I don't think that they have a clear understanding of each department and what each department does and what each staff member and manager and the likes does on a day-to-day basis. They just want their taxes to go down. That is not going to happen if we take a police officer out of the budget. That's not going to happen if we take a part-time finance manager out of the budget. So for me, I've looked at the numbers with the police force, and while I do believe we should probably do the staffing study first, be more prudent, I think there's a need for another officer. Just looking at the numbers, again, I am not a police officer. It's totally out of my scope of knowledge. So I have to rely on the chief, who was hired by the prior council, and I have to assume he was hired because he knew what he was doing, and that's what he's asking for. As time goes on, I may very well disagree with that, but after 5 months, I don't have the comfort level to say that I know more than he does. So I would probably vote to go ahead and staff the additional officer.
Okay, thank you. Susan, any comments?
I do, and I really appreciate this whole conversation. And one of the reasons I seconded the motion is I think that this issue, whether it's the police department or other staffing needs that are being requested, part of what I think is important in all of this, and specifically with the police issue, that staffing study, I think that's important for everyone. I think it's good for our managers, so they have a check on what they're doing, for the city manager, so he has a check on what his staff, just as a double check. That's going to be done immediately. What is the time frame on that? Do we have an idea? Anyone?
Yeah, just a minute. I had to turn my mic on. Susan, this is Joe Gall. The RFP, the request for proposal, is going to go out hopefully by Friday. It's in its final form. And then that process will get proposals from companies. One of the companies that's been talked about tonight and in the past that I expect to submit a proposal is a California firm called Matrix. They do a lot of this work around the country. They do good work, but there are others out there. We'll have to evaluate those proposals, make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, because sometimes you get proposals that are different. We've budgeted $20,000. Hopefully the proposals will come back with under that $20,000. And then we need to get started right away, pick a consultant and get the project done. The staffing study has been discussed for 18 months. And
the scope of that is all city staff, not just police.
No, it's just police.
It's just
It's
police?
just the police department.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of questions that have been raised by previous councils and by citizens, and what I'm hearing here tonight. The value, what we're going to learn by doing a good study, and it's not just about the number of staff. It's what are they doing? Are they in the right spots? Do we have too much command staff? Do we have not enough? I mean, we're going to know so much more than we know now, and it's going to be an external expert taking a look at it. And I think, as much as there's debate about, people have opinions about the level of staffing in the department, they all kind of agree this should be done. So let's get it done. I mean, that's what the mayor basically has told me. He's like, can we finally get this done and stop talking about it? So, we're going to get the proposal, the RFP out, hopefully by the end of this week. And hopefully we'll select somebody, hopefully in July. We'll have proposals and we'll make a selection and get the thing done. These are not things that companies like Matrix have to recreate the wheel. They do this all over the country. And there are other companies, so we may not pick Matrix, but I'm just using them. They're one of the ones that do this very often. So, so I don't know if that answers your question, Susan.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, Joe. I'm very excited about this because whatever the controversy or the different opinions, having the third-party neutral in there, it's going to take care of it, and then we just move on and we address it accordingly. So whether it stays in the police budget, but we wait until the staffing study or goes into contingency, it's a pretty easy process for the council one way or the other on that. And truly, we all have ideas about what our police officers could also be doing. And those are basically suggestions to them because we don't control them. That's Joe and Jeff, and they take care of that. So my overall recommendation, because this is in everybody's mind and we're going to work on it, I was looking at the policies that we have that are in the appendix for our financial policies, and if you look in policy 2, number 13 on page 93, one of the things that I think is the most valuable for this budget committee and this new council is that our staff will be supplying reports comparing actual to budgeted expenditures. Now, it says in our documentation on a quarterly basis that the finance department will give that to the city council, the city manager, and the department directors. I know in the past when Craig was here, you guys were doing it at a point monthly. My recommendation in the scope of what we're doing tonight is that we have monthly reports and that the budget committee be included on those reports, so we don't have downtime and a concentrated amount of time. I mean, we received this budget 27 days ago. It's amazing how far we've come in this budget. Are there a lot of questions still? Yes. Are there a lot of unanswered, either other questions or maybe other priorities? Yes. There's a lot of different things that we can do, but here we are. We have a time deadline, and with the reports that will be coming to the city council, hopefully monthly, and I guess that would be under a different motion. But I think that the amount of attention that the city council and the budget committee has on this budget right now, I would love to have that amount of attention maintained throughout the whole year. So this whole process is a cooperative and a collaborative process between staff, citizens, and elected officials.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I have a question, and I'm hoping for some clarification from Joe, if that's okay. When Chief Growth completed his presentation to us, it was my understanding that the $20,000 budget number for the staffing study is included along with another police position in the 15-16 proposed budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so so the chief has requested less than, and I'm really saying this for the community, especially to hear, that within this proposed budget, there is less than a 3% increase that our police department has proposed for fiscal year 15-16, which again, I mentioned this in our last meeting, is remarkable. My question, Mayor Clark, to your motion is, why do you prefer to see the personnel dollars placed in contingency as opposed to keeping that personnel budget amount within police services?
Because the hiring will begin. So it's not that the money is budgeted in the police department and will sit and wait for the staffing study. That is not what is proposed by this budget. What is proposed by this budget is that the hiring process will begin for an additional full-time employee in the police department without the staffing study being done. And you know, like I said, I am not against the police department. I think the police department is fantastic. It has nothing to do with that. I think it's preemptive to do a study, pay for a study on staffing and hire someone at the same time. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, you wait for the study to come back, and if the study says, you know, and I have no preconceived idea of what that study is going to say. I am just in the majority of saying that I absolutely think it's a great idea, because it will just cause all of the kerfluffling to stop, and we will get real answers and with real data. And if it says we need 3 additional officers, fantastic, let's do that. We need more admin, less patrol, great. Whatever the study says, that's what the study says, and then we'll talk about that. But it just seems, as Councilor Harris said, cart before the horse, to say, all right, we're going to pay for this study that's going to talk about the staffing and tell us what the staffing needs are, but at the same time, we're going to change the staffing. That doesn't make sense to me. I wouldn't take away staffing either. It wouldn't make sense. I think we hold the staffing until the staffing study is done, and then when we have the data, then we move on it. It's step 1, 2, 3 to me. I just don't see how you can go from 1 to 5. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Actually, Kurt, I just wanted to check with you on the phone, see if you had any comments you wanted to jump in on.
So, yeah, this is Kurt Studer. If the staff, this is a question, if the staffing study, if we hold those dollars into the contingency fund and the staffing study does in fact show that there is a need for an additional officer, is it automatic that the council would then vote to approve that officer would be added? I kind of think no, but I'd like to ask that of the council.
Kurt, if the money is left in contingency and the study comes back with that we need an additional officer, then staff would come to council with legislation requesting to increase our expenditure authority for the year to go ahead and make that hire at that point.
Would that be a supplemental or probably more, what's the other term?
Appropriation transfer, one or the other.
So there would be a process going back through council.
It does have to go through
saying,
council.
Right.
We now know more information than we knew back during the budget process.
Yes.
And,
Now, Brian, we haven't heard from you, so.
Well, thank you.
I guess, Kurt, were you finished?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, if this were a perfect world, we would have done the study a year ago when the city manager and the chief were wrangling over, do we put another body in the budget or not? Their decision was not. Now, like I said, in a perfect world, we would have rolled right into the study, but this is city government. It's not a perfect world. The city manager has to sit there and weigh his other priorities and to come up with that $20,000 to go out and do the staff study. Apparently, it just wasn't in last year's budget. It's pretty clear to me from listening last year and this year that things have changed in the police department. And they do, where last year, the chief was able to say to us, the budget committee, yeah, I think I can live without one. He's not saying that this year. He's saying, I want one and I need one. So I'm in opposition to you, Mayor Clark, saying let's give it to him. I think it's remote that we would do a study and then find out that, oh, we overhired. I think that is way out of line. I think we ought to go with it. The other thing was, I asked a member of the Police Advisory Board if they had talked about manning. And he said they had that discussion and they overwhelmingly agreed that another officer was warranted.
So I just wanted a comment on that.
All right, and then we'll go to Sally.
Okay, so Brian, I just wanted to do a little clarification on the history of last year. Actually, Mayor Middleton did bring forward that he wanted the police advisory study, and it was before last year, and I supported him, and the rest of council did not. That's why it didn't happen. Not because we didn't want it to happen, or because the budget didn't show that we needed it, or because the police didn't feel we needed it. It was because the former council wouldn't support it. Just clarifying.
All right, and Jennifer, did you have? Oh, I see. Okay.
That's what I was pointing at, because I heard the drop.
Okay, sorry about that. Sally, did you have some more comments you wanted to
Yes.
jump in?
Point of clarification, Joe, you may need to look to Captain Daniel for this, but my recollection of the discussion by the chief was that, one, he didn't include the fact that we have a full-time person available to us this year that we did not have last year because that person was on paid administrative leave, even though he was not contributing to the needs of the city. So we now have that person available. And then I believe the chief said that we were filling 1 or 2 additional positions of people who had left. So we have the ability already, even if we don't add another officer in this budget, to fill those 2 spots of people that have left. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to have Captain Daniel come up.
Because that might clarify the need for this additional person and put it more in the category of maybe we really should put this in the contingency plan.
So we did have 2 people leave
Hello.
our department
Hi.
within last year.
Mm-hmm.
We have filled one of those positions already, and that officer, in fact, is going to the academy in about 2 weeks. And so we won't see him for 4 months, and then he'll be back in training, so we won't actually get the benefit of that person for some time yet. We are prepared to fill the second vacancy right now, and that person starts on June 1st, which is next week.
Oh,
He's a lateral officer out of Iowa.
Great.
And so he's won't have to disappear to the academy for 4 months because he's a veteran officer.
Okay,
but
good.
he will have to learn our laws and that type of thing. So it'll be, at least 3 or 4 months before we see any relief from him as a result of his training. So Joe Twigg has been deployed in the military for the last year, and he has been gone. He's still gone. He's on leave. He's back in the States. He's back here in town and around, but he's still on military duty and assigned to the U.S. military for at least another 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'm not sure exactly when he's going to be coming back because he's still on orders. So we have that vacancy that we're dealing with.
okay.
And we have, as the chief was talking about, we brought on a gentleman named Judd Moore, who's a retired Beaverton officer, who has been filling in part-time to kind of fill in our vacancies to make sure that we have adequate staffing on the road.
And then our person that was on administrative leave last year, they're back in as if they're full-time and they don't need additional training?
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I just have a quick follow-up question then. So how many working officers do we have? Is it 22 for sworn staff?
We have 22 sworn positions.
And one of them is out in
One is
serving in the
still
military?
deployed on the military, and we still have not filled that other position until June 1st, which is next Monday.
Okay, so 20 working staff right now, 2 influx,
Right.
so to speak. Okay.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Okay, if there aren't any, okay, Andy?
So I know there's a motion on the table. Are we having general discussion right now or just specific to that motion?
This is specific to the motion.
From a police department perspective, I have a friend who was looking to relocate from out of state. First thing his wife looks at is what communities are safe. If there's one place that I don't want us to skimp, it's in our police department. I would even be of the mindset that whatever the study comes back, add 1 to it. So I understand your point, Mayor Clark, but I don't want to skimp there. So that's the only comment I have from a police department perspective.
I have one more question for Joe. What we would be incurring if we hire this individual or start hiring this individual, rather than holding off, would that be the cost of unemployment benefits that we would be on the hook for if we had to turn around and fire him? And how much are those unemployment benefits estimated? Because that would be the difference, I think.
Well, fortunately, we haven't paid unemployment benefits in a while, so I don't really have a question, but certainly we would be on the hook for a period of time relative to that, which would be a portion of their salary. And so I don't have a good answer for you, but we definitely would be some liability, but it wouldn't be.
My understanding of unemployment is like 60% of your salary. Isn't that about right?
Well, it doesn't appear that we can answer the
Yeah.
specific question. And I guess I'll go ahead and try and bring it home at this point, then I'll be asking for the question. My own comments, I did have an opportunity to attend the Police Advisory Board Committee meeting, and I got the hour-and-a-half-long PowerPoint presentation that was abbreviated from the 15 minutes that we got at the time. I am encouraged by the need for the study, and clearly everybody here on the Budget Committee is supporting that. That's not a question. We're not asking about cutting that out. I have been convinced by the chief that, in his professional opinion, we need to have 1 more additional staff. Now, the hope is that that might help cut down some of the overtime. But part of the comments that was presented to the Police Advisory Board at the time is that the police department can handle anything, at least they think they can handle anything that is going to present themselves today, and probably tomorrow too. But that high effort over a long period of time can create a degradation to the department that over a period of years might create problems and a downward trend for the city. The chief has convinced me that at least 1 additional staff for patrol is needed for next year. And then I'd like to see what the staffing committee recommends. I suspect that we're going to see some opportunities, perhaps some new programs, perhaps SROs for the elementary schools, and that's going to be presented, and there are going to be funding questions that are going to be asked as part of that staffing study at the time. But for right now, I believe I'm going to continue to support a added staff to the police department for this budget. Opportunity for last comments, otherwise I'm going to close the comments and call the question.
Council President.
Neil, are you saying that you support the addition before the staffing study is complete?
I am supporting the position as included in the current budget, yes. Murda?
Council President Robinson, my question to you is, based on what you've heard in this discussion, and based on your earlier comments, are you feeling at this point like placing the dollars in contingency makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will go ahead and close the discussion and call for the question. Because of the number of people that are on the phone and so on and so forth, I'm going to ask that this be a roll call vote. So will you please call the roll? And
Chair Shannon,
I vote against.
Vice Chair.
Will you state what the motion is?
Okay. Well, go ahead and restate the motion, please.
Motion was to remove $93,000 from the general fund police division budget and put it into contingency.
Okay. And I vote against.
Vice Chair
Excuse me,
Stetcher.
can I have a clarification? Is that also that the staffing study be done immediately? Is that part of the motion?
No.
No. Okay. Vice Chair Stetcher. Mayor Clark.
Aye.
Susan Claus. Susan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Harris.
Nay.
Andy Jensen.
Nay.
Counselor Kuiper.
Nay.
Andy McConnell.
Nay.
Mirta Meyer.
Nay.
Council President Robinson.
Aye.
And Kurt Studer.
Nay.
Motion fails.
Okay, the motion has failed. Now, we were continuing round robin, I believe. Mayor, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Okay. Brian?
I'd just like to thank the staff and the department heads for putting together another great budget. I don't have anything at this point. The biggest issue with me was the one we just resolved.
Okay, thank you. Susan, would you like to chime in with some general comments and suggestions or motions if you have them?
I would. Is it something that would need to be at the budget level to ask for monthly reporting from our policy to number 13 on page 93 of our document, to have the reportings instead of at a quarterly basis? It's procedurally, Neil, is that something that we can ask for here?
Susan, those policies have been adopted by council, so if we want to update them, it is something we've talked about doing in our quarterly meetings throughout the year. So at that point, this committee can review again and make recommendations for changes if needed, and that would go to council for adoption.
So the fact is, Susan, that no, it's not something that this committee will be able to address tonight. But it's certainly something that has been heard by both council and by staff, and I'm sure it's something that they will consider in the future.
And actually, I would like to consider that sooner rather than later, because this is a new budget committee and a predominantly new council, and these are financial policies that we're inheriting. These have not been looked at in detail in the 3 years that I've been here, so I think it's a good time to look at them and to make some recommendations for changes, additions, changes as what you're suggesting, Susan, and start that process sooner rather than later.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Susan, continue.
I just, my comments are along the same lines of, what I spoke of before. We have a budget that's been out 27 days, and I think that to micromanage the budget in this short time period, that we don't really have a lot of flexibility right now. That my hope is that this committee remain vigilant and active, and everybody working together. I have my overall concern from the beginning here is we have that PERS problem that's hanging out there. And even though we're talking about a 23% achievement on the reserves, we're still looking at an unfunded, liability out there that we don't know what that number is. And so my recommendation in all of this is that even though we've assigned line items all throughout this budget, and that those numbers are there, I believe our staff will be very judicious with the money and with the administration of either the projects or the duties, the staffing, because every dollar in a city like ours counts. And if we don't have a prioritized way of spending the money, and we don't keep in mind that if we spend extra dollars in one place, we've foregone maybe another project for the town. So this budget, I do have things I would like to see changed, but I think that that's more of a process of as we go. And thank you, Joe, for also being mindful of the fact that monthly would really bring the budget committee and the city council in step with the staff, and we can make decisions together for the benefit of the town and for the benefit of our infrastructure, our staffing, everything that happens. That being said, I look forward to continued communications even between meetings, and so we don't lose sight of the fact that this is a very sustained effort that needs to happen with our city resources. And when, like Jennifer Harris was saying, that people don't understand, we get a certain amount of money from the property taxes, but the other fees that are being charged, some of those increases are based on staffing levels, are based on projections that we have. So when you do make decisions in the budget, you do impact fees one way or the other, whether we say we need a Cadillac project or we need a standardized project. Those are decisions that we make, and then there are consequences to the decision. So with the transparent process and the community seeing that the budget committee and the city council and the staff are all working together, I think it can be a phenomenal process, and look forward to it.
Thank you. Mayor raised her hand, so she had a comment. So go ahead.
Thank you. I just have to say that of all the budgets that I've been to, this has absolutely been my favorite. Everyone has asked great questions. Everyone has been super respectful of not only each other, but of the staff and the heads of the department. No one has taken offense at questions. It's never been personal. It's just been, we ask a question, there's a response. I have to say it is a huge breath of fresh air, because just because you disagree on points doesn't mean you have to be disagreeable. And I just have to say that I love the new and the old members melded together, and I just think that I just wanted everyone to know that I really have appreciated, all the email questions and even the questions here and the comments, because I think this is what makes a great government. This is what makes a great process, is when people do not take it personal. When you're asking a question, it's a question. We're just asking questions of each other, and we're holding each other accountable, and I think that's fantastic. And so I just want to say thank you to not only the members of this committee, but also the staff, because I think that it's been a little uncomfortable at times, and we've asked a lot of questions that maybe haven't been asked in the past, but I think that makes for a great outcome. So I'm appreciative, and I thank you guys for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Susan, anything else before I move on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Kurt, would you like to chime in?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the city staff for all their hard work in comprising the budget and for bringing forthright answers to our questions. With the addition of the Art Center, I think adding staff to make what I would say a success of our investment into that is very important. And going back to the police officer discussions that we had, safety is the number one reason for our government, in my opinion, and supporting that additional staff is very high in my opinion, especially with what Councilor Robinson has brought up with how we're going to deal with medical marijuana as well as recreational marijuana. I think there's just going to be a tidal wave of additional needs to address that staffing study will eventually hopefully capture. So again, I thank the staff for all their hard work. That is all.
Thank you. Councilor Harris, are you still on board, and do you have any comments?
Did you say Councilor Harris?
Yes, I did.
Yes. I just want to echo what Mayor Clark said. I thank the staff immensely, and I think if we haven't proven that we can all agree and disagree and still get along yet, then you're not watching, you're not paying attention, because there is a lot of agreeing and disagreeing going on, and we all leave friendly at the end. So I just want to appreciate the Budget Committee and the rest of council and the mayor and the staff for helping us achieve that, and for all the extra information that we've asked for. I think that we're going to continue to ask for it. And to Susan's point, for me, I agree, this is not early enough for us to get the budget. So going forward, I'd hope to see that at least a month earlier. I think that would really alleviate a lot of pressure for us as a council and as a budget committee. So I don't know what steps need to be taken, but I'll leave that with Joe and just recommend that we get the budget maybe in March and have some time to pour through it. I know I'm adding to Julie's plate, but if she gets her half-time person, maybe that can happen. Otherwise, I think that this has been an amazing learning process, and I just appreciate all of you for bearing with me as I learn all of these new things in my life. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Myrta?
Okay, for the record, it's Myrta.
Myrta.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
I think that there may be an outstanding motion to be made in regard to the Street Capital Fund. So I move to amend the Street Capital Fund by, and please correct me if I'm wrong, by $900,000.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Oh, and for the Budget Committee and staff, this is on page 72. And this is, yeah, we're just amending.
And all of the amendments that we make will be lumped up and will be adopted as part of the final budget amount. We're not going to read everything over again, so keep in mind that as we get to the end, we're adopting everything that we've adopted in the middle of it, too. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any additional discussion?
On page 72, where is the change that we're talking about?
On the infrastructure line. So it's
infrastructure
listed
line.
under, it's listed under 2015-16 proposed budget, and it's currently listed at $1,295,500.
Then it should be 399,500.
And
what should it be?
it should read $395,500.
So you're going to take it from there.
Motion's been moved and seconded.
Right.
Where's the offset for that?
There is,
There is, go ahead.
Susan, it just goes into the reserve for future years. It was a double counting of a project, and it was my recommendation that this adjustment be made.
A correction to an error.
Yeah,
Does it go down into the contingency for that fund?
to the reserve, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional discussion? I will call for the question. Again, I'm going to ask for a roll. Well, I will suggest that we adopt this unanimously unless there is an objection. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, we will accept that. Okay, we had a couple of reserves, so we'll go back to those. But actually, before we do that, oh, you've got something?
There were questions last week about the monuments, and staff were going to come back with.
Ask you that.
Okay. We were going to come back with as much information as we could gather in a week, and we have done that. I gave you guys an aerial shot of First Street.
Yes.
And the staff recommendation is to look at removing / modifying, changing the 12 monuments at the 3 intersections on First Street. And to do that, what we're requesting is that you increase the street capital budget by $50,000 so that we can contract out for preliminary design and cost estimates and bring back 3 options to council of how this can be done and what those costs would be. And at that point, council can decide which one they want to go with and how we're going to fund it.
I'll make a motion that we increase the street capital budget $50,000 for proposals to remedy the monument issue.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Where did we come up with the $50,000? Do we think it's going to be that much, or are we just overestimating?
That's a staff recommendation.
Yeah, our civil engineer reviewed what we were looking at, and I mean, we had a week to come up with an estimate, so we're hoping it doesn't cost that much. That's typically what an analysis like this would run, so.
Is that an analysis that we do internally as a staff?
We would contract out.
I'd like to ask a clarification on the motion, and that's increasing the street fund capital by $50,000 and decreasing what fund by $50,000?
That would be decreasing contingency.
Okay.
So why would you do a study of that instead of just putting it out to bid? Why spend $50,000 just to come up with what the options instead of putting it out to bid and seeing how much somebody would charge to remove them?
Because it's not just removal. And I think that's a point of clarification. If we could just remove them, you'd still have to add something there, in my opinion and my staff's opinion. These monuments at these intersections contain equipment within them. So Sherwood broadband, electrical equipment, other types of utilities. So they don't
Up into the towers?
into the towers and
like
inside,
antennas?
inside the actual concrete structures. So it's not as simple as taking them away and either leaving it empty or putting a new feature in there. So part of the challenge is, okay, what are we going to do with that equipment? Where does it have to be relocated? Does it get incorporated into whatever gets built there? I wish it was as simple as just removing them, but it's not.
It's more like a feasibility.
It's more like a feasibility. What are the option in terms? We'll probably have a less costly option that from an aesthetic standpoint in Old Town, council might say, you know, that may not cost as much, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't fit in with the investment that we've done in the URA. So it's not, we have no plan at this point, and we have to develop a plan to remove those.
Seems like you could get there by having different proposals and then choose the proposal that you want rather than spending $50,000 just to find out what your options are.
How are you going to
Let-
get proposals if you don't put the specs together and ask folks what, it just is the cost of doing business. I mean,
Seems high. I haven't done a similar project before, but
And I guess I have a question for staff, which is, it seems to me that this is being driven by an urgency to remove these. And I know that there's been some comments that, somebody's going to get hurt. We've got kids who are walking behind it. And I know that this is something the council has expressed concern about. What I'm curious about is whether or not staff themselves could create their own study. I mean, basically using internal staff with internal time. Obviously, I recognize that that would stretch the time frame out because we're not having an individual or adding this extra fees to cover that. But I'm just curious, your comments or staff's comments on what it would take to do it internally rather than hiring somebody to study it for you.
well, I'll have Julia Hyduke, the Community Development Director, address that specifically. The sense of urgency, quite honestly, is, I think, as the mayor said, this current council has made it very clear to me that they believe this is an urgent project. It is a ticking time bomb, has been described. I've been here 3 years now, and I know no one that has ever said, I love those monuments. So I think the thing that has changed, there's been a lot of talk over the years, but there hasn't been clear direction from the council to me as the city manager to get this done. Quit talking about it and get it done. And it will cost some money. I hope it doesn't cost $50,000, but I don't want to shortchange us and put $25,000 and then go out and find out, oh, we don't have enough money to actually come up with concepts that'll work. Relocating these or removing them, I'm a little concerned at the ultimate price because I don't think they're going to be cheap. I think that's one of the reasons it hasn't happened over the years is because the solution to remove them and replace them is probably going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's just my gut telling me. It's just kind of like the police study. My gut's telling me something, but we actually have to go through the process to find out what the plan is and make an informed decision. But a year from now, this is the other thing that I've told my staff, I want them gone because I think that's the expectation is this is not something that we're going to drag out and be talking about a year from now. A year from now, those should be gone and replaced by something. So there is a sense of urgency that I did not have with previous councils. So,
Julia.
Julia, can I ask one question? When were they installed? And how much was involved? I mean, how many dollars were involved in the installation of the monuments?
so Tom, do you know the costs? 2005 is when they were
They were
installed?
installed in 2005, 2006, and I don't know the cost of those particular elements. It was the streetscape project. That was a $6.4 million project, but that included everything, including utilities and stormwater facilities and everything, so.
Can I ask another question?
Hold on, let's hear from Julia first.
Yeah, in answering the question about whether or not the options could be developed internally by staff, in theory, sure. We were actually talking about just even adding this project to the list of engineering projects and what would have to come off in order for them to do it. And we're looking at the list of projects, and everything that's on their list are things that are underway and or absolutely have to happen like now. So there was really nothing that we could say to take off, even to manage this project. And I said, well, we'll just figure out how to make do, and everybody's going to have to stretch a little thinner. I don't think there's really any way that we can then take on, in addition to just managing this project and managing the consultants through this project and the public involvement. We want to make sure that whatever option is chosen is something the public can buy in on. We don't want more monuments that everybody hates. We want something that everybody says, yeah, this is the option and the alternative that works best for us. And so managing that process takes some staff time, but I don't think that it can be done solely by staff without some outside assistance.
Okay, thank you. Susan, you had some comments?
I do. This was a project with the urban renewal. Why are we not using urban renewal dollars to undo this problem?
I know that Councilor Hendrickson asked that same question last week, so.
Well, it's a good question, and
This is what I like about this discussion. This is exactly what I'm talking about. $50,000 here, $50,000 there. Pretty soon it adds up, and we lose another project or something like that. So this is money from our regular city budget to fix an urban renewal project problem, and we still have money in the urban renewal budget. To me, it's more appropriate to handle over in the urban renewal.
Let's see what staff says.
Sure. So obviously, this was an urban renewal project. I think you have to understand that urban renewal has done projects, but then they turn the asset over to the city of Sherwood. So this project is in the city of Sherwood right away. It is a city of Sherwood asset. With that said, I went through and looked at the Oregon Revised Statutes. I looked at the urban renewal plan. I talked to our attorney, and it would appear with a few decisions by the Urban Renewal Board that this could be done with urban renewal monies. So that would take some action by the Urban Renewal Board, and we can talk about that more when we get to the urban renewal meeting if we want. But it certainly would be feasible to use urban renewal money for this project.
For the beginning part, for what we're talking.
And actually,
Yes.
that would have been my next question, which is, does the study fit into that same criteria?
Absolutely. It's all part of a project, so.
Yeah, I withdraw my second.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. The motion and the second have been withdrawn. Stay tuned for urban renewal, correct.
But I do have another motion.
All right, well, and in fact, it's back to the time reserved, so Sally? Oh,
I haven't had a chance to make the
oh, you're
round
right,
robin
I'm
as
sorry.
well,
Before we
so-
go to the reserve, let's go over to Andy. I apologize, Andy.
Just a couple of other comments in general. I agree with Susan Claus around PERS. Even though we don't know the dollars there, we need to be planning as best we can for it. I know from a school budget perspective, they've made estimates. They're moving forward with those estimates, though they don't know what the numbers are actually yet, and having contingency for those. So if we didn't have the reserves that we currently have, then I would be pushing back on that. But I think what we currently have is sufficient to account for that. But as soon as that information comes out, be getting numbers in there around that. As far as the Robinhood Festival, Councilor Robinson, some comments you made there. That's one place that I know there's no motion to cut that, but I wanted to express my support for that. That's more than just a festival. It's really part of the city's identity and part of the city's culture. I would not be in favor of cutting that in the future, though I would be in favor of adding more accountability, more oversight to how that money is spent and accounted for. I'd hate to see that turn into something where people were charged admission or it got cut back and wasn't the festival that it is, because it really is part of the heart of Sherwood. And then along with the others, I've been impressed with the staff's work and their diligence and care and prudence around this budget, and their ability to answer questions and explain as that they've been poked on, to dig deeper and to be able to explain the reasoning behind their proposed numbers. So that gives me a level of comfort. I don't have a deep understanding of all of it, but enough to know that the people that are coming up with these numbers have the city's best interest at heart and are being prudent with our tax dollars. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Councilor President.
I will still move, and it might not be successful, to approve a reduction in the general fund for the administrative department budget of by $24,000.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I didn't hear all of it.
Could you please repeat the motion?
Susan, the motion was to approve a reduction of the general fund in the administration department budget by $24,000, which represents the cost of the request to move the financial assistant for Julie from part-time to full-time.
Second.
Point of clarification, where would that money be going?
Well, as unspent, it would go to contingency.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Can Julie talk about why she thinks that's needed?
Sorry, when I did my presentation last week, when I got done, I realized I didn't talk about this. So what this is we had an intern this last fall for about 6 months who came in from Portland State and did a review of our contracting policies and procedures and looked at best practices with other cities, looked at the state rules that we follow. We follow Department of Revenue and Department of Justice procurement rules for contracting and procuring. And she has drafted a new policy for us that I will be bringing to council at some point here to adopt, and new procedures. And part of that review is that we're lacking in some areas of tracking. So right now, all contracts and procurement are done in the individual departments. We have no central contracting area. And we have heard from our auditors for years that while it's not a finding, they highly recommend that we at least centralized some tracking of our contracts. What happens is they come in and want to see all of our construction contracts, and I have to go out to every department in the city and pull those in from every department because we have no central place where I can go and say, here's the list of all the contracts we did this year. And so my original plan was to ask for a full-time procurement person to kick off an entire program for the city. And when we put the budget together, I realized that that was not going to happen. And so I wanted to keep making progress on this. And so I asked to add to my half-time admin to make it full-time, to start putting together a tracking system and putting together a centralized location so that all contracts, the departments will still do them, but then they get routed to finance so that we can keep track, and we'll keep track of expiration dates, how much has been spent, and that sort of thing, and have a central location for those. So that was the plan for this additional halftime. It is a new thing. It's not something we're doing now, but I do feel it is important and a fiscally responsible thing to be doing.
And from my perspective as a city
Can I
manager,
ask a question on that?
just a second, Susan, and
So-
Susan,
When we
Susan,
talk about, oh, pardon me, go ahead.
hold on a second.
hold that thought, Susan. I'm sorry. From my perspective as a city manager, in terms of best practices and oversight, this is an area that I'm not as comfortable as I should be. It's not that I think anything's being done wrong. It's just that we don't have a good oversight from my office and the finance department of how we're managing our contracts. And as we do more grants and other kind of things and bring in outside resources, it's an area we need to do better. And I support this. I probably would like to have a full-time regular procurement officer, but we can't afford that right now. So if I can get some attention and some focus from the finance director on this, and I think the new city attorney being an internal resource will help in this area as well. Because purchasing and contracting it's just kind of the normal business that we do, and I think we can improve there. So that's why I'm supporting this position and included it in my proposed budget. So
Okay,
go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Go ahead with your comments.
Okay. What level of expertise is this halftime going to have? I mean, are they going to have an accounting degree? Are they going to have experience in the kind of software we do? I mean, or is this somebody that we're going to be training from the ground up and asking them to do what we want done?
So I already have a halftime admin. This is just making her position full-time. And this first phase of this is strictly administrative. It's collecting the contracts as they're finalized, creating a database to track them, working with the managers when they come up, when they're expired, when there needs to be change orders, just keeping track of that. So it's more administrative work. They don't need an accounting degree. This is the position that Kelsey already fills as a halftime admin. We would just be making it full-time.
And with the several different upgrades that we've done of our computer financial system, here's what I want to know. We've gone through 3 significant iterations of our financial software in the last, 10 years? I mean, how many since you've been here, Julie? You've been here 8 years?
Yes, we've
Or
done.
how long have you been here? Anyway,
I've been here
my
9 and
point
we've
is,
done 1.
every single time that we've gone and said, hey, we need a new computer system, it's going to do everything that we need to do. It's going to do our job costing. It's going to do everything so we can click, 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 and there's our report and we know where we are. Part of the $66,000 that we're trying to get out of the $419,000 that we want to have as one-time expenditures, is that $66,000 going to have anything to do with this part-time position, or this is just a specific task of trying to organize the grant funding and the different departmental jobs and put them under Joe's purview?
Okay. So, Susan, in the 9 years I've been here, we have done 1 major upgrade. We've talked about upgrading and changing systems for several years, and the funding hasn't been available until this last fiscal year it was approved, and we are partially through that now, and hope to be up and running come fall, and that $66,000 is to finish that project. The funding for the additional half of the admin is not part of that $66,000, and the duties of that person are a separate task from the new system. This is to centralize and get our arms around all of these contracts. We'll be able to do grants as well. They work very similarly as contracts. So it's just getting our arms around everything that's out in all of the other departments in the city.
I'd like to add a couple of comments. I feel very close to this microphone. So, less than a year ago, I sat before our former council with grave concern over the fact that there did not appear to be a procurement process in place for city contracts, supplemental agreements. And as I see this, this is a way for our staff to reduce liability in many respects. I was not clear last year how decisions were reached, why contracts were not reviewed, why expiration dates and supplemental agreements were made, and how they came to be. And I feel very confident that with a procurement process in place, those things will be avoided. I feel like our new council has made quite clear that this issue of transparency in city business is of utmost importance. And in the many meetings that I sat through last year and into this year, I've heard from the community, my neighbors and others, that it's important. I want to know what's happening. I want to know that our staff can easily look at contracts, can easily piece together agreements and understand how they fit and why decisions are made, how they're tracked, and that we know very, very clearly what is happening. So I fervently support the addition of this person.
And I wanted to add as well, as someone who works with multiple cities and the kind of work that I do as a consultant, I've worked in cities where there is a very siloed department process where you have contracts, you're not sure where those contracts originate from, or it's with that department. And then I work with cities that have a centralized procurement process, and there's so many benefits to having a contracts and procurement department, actually. Our city is not the size yet to get there, but having this part-term person go to full-time to start working on that, there will be a point in the future where the city of Sherwood will need to have a centralized contracts and procurement department. It helps not only department staff in the city, it not only helps council, but it helps the contractors that you're working with immensely, because a lot of times you're working on a contract, your numbers may not be the numbers that the city has, and if you've got one place to go, you've got someone that you consistently work with on contracting, it really does go a long way. And I agree with Mirta, it absolutely reduces liability. So I'm for that.
Additional discussion to the motion.
I just want to point
I
out.
just wanted to say, go ahead, if somebody else is going to say something.
I wanted to point out that, first of all, I don't want anyone to be offended of the things that I mention, and I don't think Julie is taking offense at all. But my role here is to bring forth opinions, questions, and challenge kind of the status quo to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so I do sincerely appreciate all of staff's efforts in putting this together. I don't want that to be miscommunicated at all. And not having the presentation last week about this position, I really didn't have an understanding of why we needed this person. So I appreciate the feedback, because oftentimes simply asking the question gets you the answer that you needed in order to move forward. So thank you for that. I do appreciate that so much.
Okay. Any additional discussion to the motion? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of reducing the administration budget as indicated, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, signal by nay.
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 It seems to be unanimous. All right. Mayor, I believe you reserved a little bit of time at the end.
Oh, I took it.
Oh, you've taken it. Okay.
I already took it.
Well, then I guess we are to the point we are ready for a motion, and I've been given the script. So I would like to move to approve the proposed 2015-2016 City of Sherwood budget including the prior approved motions to amend. I also move that the Sherwood Budget Committee approve the taxes for 2015-16 fiscal year of 3,200. That number is not right. Okay, 3.2975, thank you. I was looking at comma, not a period, per 1,000 assessed value for operating purposes. Now, one question on the motion. There was some discussion about corrections of the... That's narrative. Okay, that's narrative. Okay, so that is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Brian. Additional discussion.
I just want to say that, again, if we have the understanding that this is going to be a monthly event, and that it's a budget and process that we're all focused on, because obviously these numbers are going to change throughout the year, and I'm just looking forward to the fact that we can, on a monthly basis, everybody take a look at where we are.
Thank you, Susan. Any additional comment to the motion? If not, I will call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there opposed?
Nay.
We have one, and please note that for the record. At this point, then, I will adjourn the... Let's see, did you give me a script on that one too, then? Okay, the Budget Committee meeting is now adjourned, and we will be coming back in 5 minutes, maybe 7, for the URA committee meeting. Thank you. So thank you very much. Call the Urban Renewal meeting to order, Budget Committee meeting to order. I will now call the Sherwood URA Budget Committee for the meeting for Saturday, May 27th.
Sorry.
Mm.
It's May 27th.
It is May 27th. Let's make that Wednesday, May 27th. And Julie, will you please do the roll?
Chair Shannon,
Here.
Vice Chair Stetcher,
Here.
Chrisanna Clark,
Here.
Susan Claus,
Here.
Beth Cook is absent, Jennifer Harris. Counselor Harris, did we lose you?
Oh, here, sorry.
Thank you. Linda is absent. Andy Jensen? Here. Dan King is absent. Jennifer Kuiper?
Here.
Andy McConnell?
Here.
Mirta Meyer?
Here.
Sally Robinson?
Here.
And Kurt Studer.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I guess we will receive the budget message. Tom?
So thank you, Chair. So before I start the budget message, I am gonna actually read it from the document, but I'm going to make some changes just because as I've gone through it, I've noticed some things got changed in the way we put together the actual budget this year, which was different than last year. So I'm just gonna read the whole thing. It's fairly short, and then I'll go into actually the budget itself. So
Thank you.
It's my privilege to provide you, the citizens of the City of Sherwood, and the Budget Committee with the proposed Urban Renewal Agency budget for fiscal year 15 and 16. The agency budget consists of two parts, general operating and a capital funds and capital projects. The operating portion is used to account for agency administrative costs and economic development activities within the urban renewal area. The capital projects portion is used to account for construction projects and property purchases. All the projects funded through the Urban Renewal Agency capital projects are transferred to the city ownership on completion. The agency operates under guidance from the agency board of directors. Fiscal year 15-16 proposed budget. The fiscal year 15-16 operations budget is largely a status quo budget, but there are some additional expenses as we maintain and prepare to divest of assets in future years. Economic development activities which support the Old Town's Sherwood, and city involvement in regional economic development partnerships are budgeted to continue. Debt service payments account for the majority of the expenditures in this fund. The fiscal year 15-16 capital projects budget primarily includes appropriations to construct a parking lot on the First Street properties acquired by the URA in 2014, sidewalk improvements in Old Town alley conversion between First and Second Streets, and signage for the Sherwood Center for the Arts. Funding for all projects will come from fund balance. The agency will spend this year winding down construction activities and preparing to place the agency in a position to run with little effort until the URA debt is paid off in 2021. I'm looking forward to an active year of agency progress and achievement.
Thank you. And I guess we continue with you as far as the urban renewal overview.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of go through the urban renewal overview, and I've got a few things that I'm going to just kind of address because I've heard some conversation relative to certain items, and maybe can kind of go through those as we go through. First off, it says operations budget up there. We'll probably change that title to be operations and capital or some other title so that we're it's clear that this includes both portions. We used to have a separate operations and a capital budget, and this year we decided to put them into one because our capital projects are going down so much. It didn't make sense to manage two funds. It made more sense to manage one fund. So we may change that title. Resources, really, these are, the tax increment financing that we receive for the most part. I don't think there's really any other resources other than some fines and interest, which is really just interest that we earn on some of the money that we have in reserve. As far as expenditures go, they're really personal services, which is mostly my time, and then some other staff time relative to additional staff that helps on certain capital projects primarily. Material and services, professional services. So professional and technical, $32,000. That's typically what we use in order to operate the urban renewal for different projects. That includes some design work for certain projects. But one thing that I've heard is a desire to deal with the monument situation. And so I told you that I took a look at this, and I'll kind of expand on what I said a little bit earlier during the city portion. There's really three things that determine how we are able to do expenditures inside the Urban Renewal Agency. They're, first off, the Oregon Revised Statutes, which is a state law that tells us, how to set up an urban renewal agency and how to expend funds. There's an urban renewal plan, which was adopted back in 2000 and then was last modified, I think, in 2014 with a major update, or actually 2012 with a major update in 2014. And then there's an urban renewal report. As I looked through the ORSs, it said in there that we could spend monies on transportation type projects, which include street sidewalks and other things, as long as it was a project in the plan. And so I would think that an action that would have to be taken, and I talked to our attorneys today, and they agreed that the URA is probably going to have to take some action in order to change the plan to create a project that would encompass doing that. And that would also probably require them to go back and look at the priorities, because there's a list of priorities that was put together by SERPAC, and then the URA board has looked at a number of times as to what they want to do. So those would probably be the two things that would need to happen before those monies could actually be spent, but I don't think those actions would need to happen before the monies were allocated. So I think it would be safe to go ahead and add some monies probably into the professional and technical services line of the budget. And I would actually propose adding $30,000 rather than $50,000. Just listening to the conversation tonight, I tend to agree with the comments from Andy Jensen that we would probably do this project as a design build type option. There are certainly things that we need to do to be able to put together the proposals and to understand what we're dealing with. But that's not $50,000 in my opinion. That's probably a lot less. We can do a lot of those actual design costs. We can actually include in the contract and move forward in that process. So I would propose that, changing that professional technical services and adding $30,000, so going from $32,000 to $62,000. Just a couple of other comments as you go through there. You see community activities, well, $45,000. Yeah, that's great. And what's that? That's actually facade grant program. So we typically have done facade grant programs, and so I budgeted for 3 full facade grant programs, which would be $45,000 this year. Infrastructure is really the projects that I mentioned before. So the construction of the parking lot on the First Street properties, sidewalk improvements in Old Town, and the Old Town alley conversion between First and Second Street. What I didn't include in the budget was some monies for the Center for the Arts. That could be some tenant improvements, which we know we're expecting to do, as well as just some capital stuff that is kind of going to trickle over probably in the next year. We probably can do that within the capital infrastructure that we already have outlaid, but if we have to come back for some reason, that we'll do that at that point in time. So I wouldn't propose any changes at this point. The furniture and equipment is actually to put a art center signage out there. We've always talked about doing a monument sign and also having some reader boards out there, not only for the art center, but for the community in general. We rely on the Robinhood lot sign. That's expensive to maintain, and we think that a reader board would probably be better, so that's what that $25,000 is. With that, really, the rest of all the expenditures are really debt service. The URA took out a lot of debt in bonds and loans in order to do projects. And as I said, that's expected to be paid off in 2021, but this, what's shown here, is our debt payments for this year.
Thank you, Tom. Is this a question for Tom then?
Yes.
Okay.
Tom, why did we go from 15,000 to 32,000 on the professional and technical without adding the additional 30? Is my first question. Second question, what is the sale of fixed asset?
Why don't you do the sale of fixed asset, and I'll look up the other one.
So the sale of fixed assets is, we are working to sell off the property that the URA owns, and we're making the assumption we're going to sell off at least one of those properties next year. So that's what that is. The professional and technical, so Tom alluded to earlier that this in the current year and in prior years, we have had 2 funds, an operating fund and a capital fund. And this year we just combined them. So if you look
Sorry to interrupt, but I can't hear any here. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be hearing what you're saying, but could you talk a little louder, please?
A little closer to the microphone.
Sure.
All right.
So actually, can I stop you because you're going to say something that's not probably 100% correct. So in the 6190, I believe that's 6190, the professional and technical services. That is actually what we typically use in the $10,000 for we have reports that we have to prepare, end of year reports and other reports we have to do. But we've also put $22,000 in there for a rare intern. And so one of the things that we've been talking about at the URA board is to get someone in here to actually do a lot of business development support and some other things in Old Town. It's one of the projects that have been identified by the URA board as being important, and we've set $100,000 aside for that. And our goal is to get an intern from the rare program, which we've applied for, and we'll hear back from in the next few weeks as whether we get it or not. But that would give us a full-time staff person working 11 months of the year in order to support Old Town activities.
And that was 22,000?
That's correct. Sorry.
Yes.
Just 22,000.
I was going to say, I was totally lost.
Wow.
That's an expensive intern. Okay.
My apologies.
I have a question for you about furniture and equipment.
Mhm.
$25,000 for a signage for the Arts Center seems really cheap to me.
Yeah, and maybe it is, but we're limited to a 6x6 sign by city code, so we can't go very big or very large. Signs have come down fairly significantly priced because you can do a lot of different things. You don't necessarily need to do the backlit sign with all the other, fancy things. Probably the biggest cost that we're taking a look at is the electronic reader boards. And even those have
Yeah.
come way down in price. So,
Okay.
so $25,000, it's an estimate, but I think we'll be in that ballpark when we're done.
Okay.
Would that be something similar to what St. Francis has?
Yeah, or one of the schools. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Joe, I'm willing to bet the people on the phone couldn't hear what you were saying.
My bad. For the folks on the phone, I was asking if the sign would be similar to what St. Francis has or some of the schools have in terms of the type of signage, and he confirmed that. So
Okay, what about signage on the actual front of the building? You've got the reader board sign. Is that going to be the only sign that designates? I didn't catch that.
So the monument is what we're hoping to do, at least is what we've proposed and what is planned, is to do a sign that accomplishes two purposes. One is a monument sign that says Center for the Arts, so it advertises that as being a monument sign. If you take a look on the building up around the channel above it, we have Center for the Arts lettering up there. Certainly, there's an option to do more signage on the building at some point in the future, but we haven't proposed that at this point in time, and we'll see how the building operates and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Tom?
This is Susan, do we have any city property out on the highway?
Not owned by the Urban Renewal Agency, no.
The reason that I'm asking is that, I mean, you don't have much of a traffic count, of course, right down at the center. And it seems like if you could get some kind of a dynamic sign out there off of Meineke or something.
Oh.
So, I mean, that's just something to consider. I don't know. The signage you're talking about now is just on-site signage, right?
That's correct. And out there in Meineke is outside of the Urban Renewal Agency boundary, so we really wouldn't be able to construct something out in that particular location. I think you could do something trying to get ODOT to agree to, at Sherwood Boulevard and 99W, but that we had real issues trying to put signs in there when we were doing the photo red light stuff because of the number of signs that are already at that location.
To piggyback Susan's comment, I am wondering if any thought was given in terms of more directional type signage that at this point in time may be more beneficial to lead people to the Center for the Arts. And my thought on that is, in its infancy at this point, is a reader board the most effective use of funds? This is a lot of money for a reader board.
Yeah, and so this would certainly not be for this, certainly extensively for the Center of the Arts. We currently have a reader board, which is on the Robinhood lot sign. This would really be meant to replace that. That sign is very expensive for us to maintain and to put the letters up. We're doing that more, once or twice a week. And so we feel that just the cost savings from not having that sign and doing it actually electronically would pay for itself within a year or two. I think Kristen thinks probably a year or less, but probably a year or two, what I would say.
Thank you. Any additional comments for Tom?
Yeah.
What's the fixed asset that we're selling, the $150,000?
That is property that's owned by the Urban Renewal. As we wind down the district, we'll be selling the properties that we own. And that's just the sale of one of those properties next year.
I have a follow-up question to Susan's question. And where is that property located? Is it right in downtown?
Yeah, so the property that we've identified here is on Main Street.
Okay.
It's a property that we purchased for the construction of the water quality facility. It's just one house north of Columbia Street. And we needed the property to to put in a water quality facility, which was required when we did the community center, the downtown streets, a bunch of other projects down here. And so we were able to delay that project for a number of years, purchase that property, built the water quality facility, did a lot line adjustment. Now we want to sell the property
Okay,
back.
and that's zone residential?
It is residential.
Okay,
and
all right,
it will be
thank you,
sold as
that's
such.
fine. Okay.
Any follow-up? Okay, well,
Do we have a list of all of what the Urban Renewal District owns right now that will be sold off to the city?
We have a list that we've presented to SERPAC and the Urban Renewal Board a number of times, and we kind of have guidance from them as to what they would like to do. I don't have it with me, but we certainly have had those conversations numerous times.
is that available online? Part of the minutes of the meetings, or?
Yes, it would be in the minutes. Well, it should be so.
Okay. If it's not available, Susan, I'm sure that Joe can make arrangements so you get a copy.
Yeah, but just for the budget committee, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, thank you very much, Tom. And we will now open the meeting to accept public comment on the 2015-2016 City of Sherwood Urban Renewal Budget. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms on the table and submit them up front. The committee, I will then recognize those persons wishing to speak and any questions that should be addressed through the committee chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and city of residence for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Please limit your testimony to 4 minutes. Do we have anybody here who would like to testify in regards to the Urban Renewal Agency budget? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And I guess we're now into committee comments. Anybody have any comments that they'd like to address in regards to the URA budget?
I had one that's just on page 4 under the capital budget, and it's probably a very simple answer. We had in the budget that we're just finishing, there was a $4 million transfer in. What is that?
That's in the current year. What that is that's a transfer in from the operations fund. So
Okay, was that for the art center?
Yes, for capital projects, the art center.
So did we transfer money from the Urban Renewal District into a city fund and then transfer it back?
No. That $4 million is a transfer from URA Operations Fund to the URA Capital Fund. So all of the revenue comes into the Operations Fund, and the capital is expended out of the Capital Fund, and you have to transfer money out of Operations into Capital to pay for it. So it's just between the two URA funds.
Okay, so on page 3, it's the $4 million transfer out on the operations.
Yes.
That's the offset.
Yep.
And that's actually last year's budget, am I correct?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, no, I just was trying to clarify just to have an idea. I mean, that was the last big project we did last year, and we're not really proposing anything in the way of big projects this year.
Right, and that's why you don't see any transfers out for this year, because we're combining the funds into one.
And I have a question on salaries and wages. Whose full or part thereof salaries paid out of the budget for urban renewal? And is that based on time spent, the time that Tom spends on urban renewal?
It's Tom's time, it's our engineering staff time who are working on the capital projects. It's all related to who's working on those projects.
And do you have internal numbers? So if you're keeping your timesheet, you put down a certain code for, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I believe there was some discussion about monuments, and I think Tom had presented some numbers, but we're open for a motion. If not, we will leave it out of the budget.
I move that we accept Tom's recommendation to include an additional $30,000
Just in the fund.
in the fund.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have a discussion on the motion?
One quick discussion on that. Does that include city staff writing the bid specs then? That that 30,000 is in response to specs that the city staff would write so that,
Yeah, I would assume that would include everything up to, and that would come out of staff time.
okay.
But that would include the analysis and then probably putting together the specifications and
So that
documents
could be-
such that we could do a request for proposal. Probably not the request for proposal itself and all the other
Okay.
project-related costs, that's an unknown at this point. But I would certainly assume that a part of what we would have the professionals do would be to write what those specifications were for us so that we could put that together.
Okay, so 30,000 would be about right, 30 to 30?
I'm thinking 30 is probably on the heavy
Okay.
side, to be honest with you. I mean,
They're shooting at the hip a little bit.
That's fine, I know.
We are, but the reality is, there's certain things that are going to be repeated over and over
Yeah,
for each
yeah.
monument. And so probably the most expensive part is we're going to have to go out and probably do a survey because there's a lot of underground utilities that we got to figure out, and some of those things. But the actual, design element, there's 4 types of monuments. And so, you'll probably have just slightly different variations for those. And
I'm hoping you have some pretty good as-builts.
We do, but I don't want to rely on as-built when you're talking about power and
Yeah.
fiber. So.
No, I understand.
I just want to make a clarification to the motion that the motion is to move $30,000 from the contingency fund into the Urban Renewal District Operations and Capital Fund with the intention of doing a review of the removal of the monuments. Is that correct? Was that your motion, Mary Jane?
It is.
And that's
So
my
we would be reducing contingency by 30,000 and increasing, what was it,
Just the
professional
total.
technical?
Just the total expenditures.
Okay.
And I have a clarification question based on what I learned this afternoon, and that is that staff or Joe, I'm not sure who, has determined that 12 of the monuments are to be removed, but not all of them, because apparently some of them are not considered dangerous because they're not at an intersection where the buses are having a hard time getting by and block pedestrians from view or
I
something.
don't know if there's actually been a solid proposal on exactly what's going to be removed. We won't know that until we actually understand what
Okay.
we're dealing with and the costing and everything else. But certainly those 12 stick out as the ones that have been identified as a safety concern. So that will be what this process identifies and will inform future decisions relative to what actually gets accomplished. Joe, you can.
And Council President Robinson, those are the ones that I think are the most dangerous because those are where pedestrians in Old Town are trying to cross and can't be seen from cars. There may be, we're going to learn a lot through this process, and there may be additional monuments that we want to relocate or remove and things like that. But I really wanted to focus on those first 12 and get those done.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify so the public knows that when we say we're doing this pre-design build removal of the monuments, that it's not necessarily all of them in the city.
And that's why I wanted,
Yeah.
we took the extra step, and I asked staff, please do a map so it's very clear to everybody in terms
Right.
of what we're going to focus on to start this process. We may do more, but let's get these 12 done.
And I love the map and also the idea of relocating if we can to keep some of that consistency throughout the blue color that we got going on in the city. That was such a big deal. Hey, the blue color from 10 years ago, but just keep some of that continuity. If we can keep them and reuse them, that would be great.
Okay, any other additional comments to the question? Hearing none, I will call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Any additional questions, comments, anything you'd like to have addressed on the current URA budget?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Susan.
On the May 20th, attachment A on page 16, that we had for the budget committee meeting, there's more of a detail for the urban renewal fund. And within that detail, and the cross-reference here is page 3 on our operations budget. Under other materials and services, there's about $50,000. It's $49,870, and that breaks down to an administrative overhead reimbursement of $43,480, and then an engineering overhead on capital projects. I'm assuming, is that a reimbursement? How are we calculating our administrative overhead reimbursements that we've done out of the urban renewal budget back into our normal City of Sherwood account?
The
This looks like a 10% overhead that we're taking off of maybe $450,000 worth of projects.
The overhead is calculated, we use the same method for all funds, and it's a proportional, so it's the administrative costs in the administration division less any direct revenue that those departments earn. Whatever's left is allocated out to the other general fund departments and all of the other funds based on a proportional share of personal services charged to those departments and funds. So it's the exact same formula for all funds, all departments.
What is that? In this instance, how did we come up with the $43,480?
By plugging in the numbers from the administration division into the formula of what personal services are charged to the other departments and the other funds.
Which is different from our wages and taxes and benefits, the personal services.
That is what makes up personal services, is the wages, taxes, benefits.
Is there a way, Julie, that you could maybe explain that, how we do that back and forth? Is it the same rate?
Yes.
Or what rate is that?
It's a proportional share. So if one fund has $50,000 in personal services and the other fund has $10,000, it's a proportional share of whatever is charged to those funds.
Are we taking the personal services? We're taking an overhead. Also, like the $105,000 that we have for the personal services, are we calculating that overhead off of that?
Yes.
So off of $105,000, we're taking $43,000 more.
Yes.
So what is that? That looks like a 40-some percent?
It's about 40%. Mm-hmm.
Is that typical what we do? So anytime our staff goes into any of the funds, whether it's urban renewal or like street fund or whatever, we charge that fund backwards 40% in addition to our personnel services back to the general fund?
Yes.
Where did we come up with that 40% figure?
It's based on the cost of the administration division.
But is that where?
Susan, I don't know that.
Is that a rate that your finance department came up with? Or is that like a ballpark figure where we said, hey, we've got, city staff in place, we're going to go in. I mean, are we doing this in the dedicated funds also?
Yes, we do it in all funds, all departments. I don't know that I can explain it without showing you.
Could you maybe put a memo together or something for the budget committee that explains how that works? Because what you're saying, I mean, so every year we have our staff expense that we pay for as a city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then everything that the staff does in I mean, I don't know, you would tell us in the memo what funds. if staff goes into like the water fund or the urban renewal fund for this instance, if they go into those funds, then there's an automatic 40% charge back to the unrestricted general fund, right?
Essentially, yes.
And we've done that policy for how long
Since
in the city?
as long as I've been here. It is a rudimentary way to do overhead. And a new cost allocation model is on my project list to do. I just can't do everything I want to at once, but it's on my list of things that we want to look at. Craig and I have been talking about it, especially with Public Works, of changing the way we allocate administrative overhead. I mean, the whole point of an administration division is so that you don't have to have the water fund go hire a payroll person and the sanitary fund go hire a payroll person. You have one centralized location that does central processing of these things, and then you allocate those costs out to the different funds so that you're not having to go hire multiple little mini finance, HR, IT departments. There are definitely many different ways to do cost allocation. There are some cities who have models that are so complicated to make your eyes spin. I don't want to do that, but I think that we can definitely do better and have a more sophisticated system, but it's a matter of resources and time.
40% is a big number.
I have a question.
And it doesn't, we don't have it really justified. We've just been doing 40% as a surcharge on our staff from
Isn't
those
that trued
dedicated
up
funds back to
at the
the
end of the
general
year?
fund, right?
Yeah, when we charge it
It's trued up.
from month to month, it's based on actuals. So
Yeah.
if one month it's 30% or one month it's 42%, we charge the actuals. We don't just charge a flat 40%. But for budget, I have to put something together and
Yeah.
So for personnel services, you're still going to come up with that 43,480, whether you do a certain amount one month and a certain amount another month, but
maybe
it's still tagging off of that $105,000.
it depends.
Right,
It's
budget. Yeah.
this number in here is a budget number. What we do from month to month is actuals. So whatever the revenue the administration division brings in, we offset that against our expenditures, and whatever's left is what we allocate out to the other departments. So we do it month to month based on actuals. So this is just a roll-up of the entire year's worth of personal services costs, the entire year's worth of administrative costs, and it came out to 40%. It won't be 40% every
year,
single month.
right.
It'll fluctuate depending on the spending level. Like in July, we pay all of our insurance for the year. So July's rate might be higher because we have large expenditures in July, and then in future months, it may be lower because we don't have as many expenditures. So it just fluctuates from month to month based on actuals.
And those actuals are calculated based on the charge number that they're
Yes.
given to the job or
Yes.
department.
So are you, I mean, if what is it a different number than 40% then? I mean, historically, we've been doing this for
Susan,
9
this
years
is
since you've
Mirta.
been
I'm
here.
sorry to interrupt you, but I think that there may have been a miscommunication. What I heard you ask was whether 40% is used as the percentage billing. And I'm hearing that that is not the case.
It is not.
The billing is based on actual time out of whatever fund personnel are coming
Allocated.
from, if you will. Does that help at all? So 40% is not the bill rate. The bill rate is based on actual time. Julie, is that correct?
Yes.
So my question is, we do we have an override. I'll just call it an override that we do on the staff when personnel services are assigned to the different funds. Is that a correct statement?
We have overhead that is allocated to those funds based on staff time that is allocated to those funds.
Okay, and then do we also have an override or a percentage when a project comes in that is charged for administrative overhead to a project?
No, the overhead is charged to the fund. And so if someone's working on a project in a fund, that's part of that overhead charge for the month. It's not a separate charge.
What do you mean by override, Susan? I'm not sure I understand your
Like
question.
here's another example. And the reason that, we've done a lot of projects in the Urban Renewal Agency, but like on the Cedar Creek Trail, that grant money, we took an administrative override off of that grant of how much?
I don't, if you're talking about administrative overhead, yes, that's part of the project that's charged to the fund, and I don't have the number of what was allocated to that project.
It was about $1 million that went into the general fund of the $5 million grant. Is that about right?
No. Can we take this conversation, and I don't know that I am going to be able to explain this to you over the phone. I think I'm going to have to give you some examples. If you want to come in
That'd be great.
If you want to come in and meet with me.
If you could just put together something for the budget committee. So if there is something like what we just are talking about here in the Urban Renewal District, if we're taking an override in addition to the personal services that's tied to the personal services, whatever that process is, and as I understand it, you're going to be modifying that. You and Craig have talked about that. Or if we also take other percentage, and I'm calling them overrides, whether you call them administrative, let's see, what do you call it? Administrative overhead reimbursement or administration on a grant. Just trying to understand what that is. So if we have a project that comes in, is there a base level of, if the project is, $100,000, do we do a 20% administrative cost as part of that 100,000 or whatever it is? Do you understand what I'm saying? To understand how that flows through the budget, or how it flows through the budget if we have a certain amount of staffing levels that we have in these different funds, if in addition to the staffing level cost that we have another automatic administrative cost that is inherent in those funds that goes back to the administrative unrestricted fund.
I'm thinking, Susan, that we probably should defer the discussion of how overhead is based till a future budget committee. I think for the purposes of this budget, basically we have thrown a number at it that is an estimate of what may be the yearly charge for the URA. As what is trying to say, though, is that it may or may not be, we hope it's close to that number. We doubt that it's going to be exactly that number. But
Well,
are you
Yeah, I understand, and what I'm saying is that whatever that number is, I think it's an important number, and it's 41% on this particular budget, and if that's an estimate, I mean, I know Julie did her best job putting all of this together.
Right.
So, and she's been here 9 years, so if we know we have, I mean, if that's pretty close to what it is, or is it 35 or whatever it is, just thank you in advance, Julie, for helping.
We'll try and put a primer together about how the city charges overhead, and maybe in fact include a discussion about ideas in the future on how the city would like to deal with overhead. Any other questions related to the URA budget? Anybody else on the phone? If not, I guess there's the motion.
Is there something we need to discuss about tax rate? Okay.
Not on URA.
Okay.
Yeah. So. All right, so we move to approve the proposed 2015-2016 Sherwood Urban Renewal budget, including the prior approved motions to amend, and to approve the taxes for the 2015-2016 fiscal year of $3,534,760 for operating purposes. Is there a second? Second. Andy is our second. Is there any additional discussion to the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? That, I believe, concludes our business.
I have something to add.
Mayor?
There's been some discussion over here in the corner, and I think that there needs to be a clarification piece. Just trying to find the page. I'll find it. Hang on one second. It is the page where there is a Scrivener's error on an increase 4%.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of kerfluffle over here. I want to make sure that everybody understands. Can you get me the page number on that?
This is on the main budget or urban renewal budget?
In the budget message, I know.
Budget
What
message,
page?
yes.
Page 6.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, page 6 on the budget message, water fund. It states this process resulted in that, during fiscal year 2014-15, the city updated the water master plan along with the rates and the SDC methodology. This process resulted in a 20-year plan for the city's water system. A water rate increase of 4% and a 20% reduction in SDCs are included in this proposed budget. We talked about this.
Yeah.
It is what Julie considers a Scrivener's error. It is a water rate increase of 4% is not included in this proposed budget, would be the correct correction. We are considering it a Scrivener's error, so we do not need a motion according to our staff. Is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. I will.
So we're going to keep that very specific language of that the 4% and the 20%. We're just going to say that we're not doing that.
No, what we're saying is we're striking the word "are" and putting in "is not." So a water rate increase of 4% and 20% reduction in SDC is not included in this proposed budget. So the council may continue to discuss that issue, but it's not part of this budget. Okay. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I think you just adjourn it.
Then it's adjourned.